I learned to water ski on the Ohio River. Now, the Ohio River is outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where they used to have a lot of steel mills. And during this time, there was still a lot of steel mills back then. And so the water was, let me say this, unclean, okay? There was oil slicks. Sometimes the water would actually go into flames. The steel mills just dumped stuff into it. When you were water skiing, you'd find dead animals and that kind of things. The only fish that would survive the water of the Ohio River at that time was carp. You couldn't catch anything else. It was really yucky. But I learned how to water ski, and it was fun. And so eventually, and I'm not an athlete at all, and so I water skied like this, bent over, and it wasn't pretty at all. But eventually, I got good enough that I could get up, and that was fine. And then eventually, I decided to jump the wakes. You just go, there's a wake on the left side and the right side, and I would try to jump them. And usually I crashed and burned, but sometimes I would make it, and I would get across and come back, and it was a fun time. Our lives are sort of like a boat in that has wakes. There's a right side and there's a left side, and then we make a wake with our lives. We make an impact on those things around us. And in many ways, we look at ourselves and what does the wake of our lives look like? What is behind us? What legacy do we leave behind us in the wake of our lives? It's a powerful question. What do I leave behind with my actions and my conversations? What wake do my friends, my team members, my family members experience on the other side of me? The question can be very eye-opening, and Dr. Henry Cloud is the one who sort of initiated this thought with me in his book called Integrity, in which whenever we go through life, we leave behind us wakes, okay? Wakes that include two things. One side would be the wake of our results, what we do and what we accomplish. And the other side would be the wake of our relationships. And that affects every area of our lives, whether it's our work lives, whether it's our home lives. Both of these things impact, how we do our lives, impacts what goes behind us. Henry Cloud said this about our wake. The wake is the results we leave behind. The wake doesn't lie, and it doesn't care about excuses. It is what is. No matter what we try to explain why or to justify what the wake is, it still remains. It is what we leave behind. It is our record. On the relationship front, it really comes down to whether people that we've worked with or what we've lived with actually would like to work with us again. Would they actually like to work with us again? Would they actually like to live with us again? Or would they rather, if all said and done, I'd really rather not. And on the relationship side, that's how we impact our families in such a way that not only do they love us, but they like us and they want to be with us. Whenever you hear about Thanksgiving dinner, actually people are excited about coming together with you, and they're glad about it. That's the relationship side, And then there's the result sides about what we do and what we accomplish. The concept of the wake is haunting and exhilarating. It comes out of our character, the wake that we leave behind, the actions that we do, the words that we say, and the legacy that we leave behind for people to remember us. I've gone to several funerals since I've been here over the last, 9 months, 6 months, whatever long it's been. The people talk about the wake behind, right? The legacy that left behind by those that person who touched. Sometimes they focus on the work, and sometimes they focus on the relationships. But everyone leaves awake. And one of the things that people will say to me is, well, I just don't want you to have to lie at my funeral. I just don't want to have to. And I don't want to have to do that either. So, and I can tell you the truth, I won't. Okay. I may not say everything, but I just won't lie. Your legacy is made up of two wakes. There's a wake of results and your wake of relationships. And today we're going to look at the Psalm of Solomon. Solomon writes this psalm. He doesn't write too many of them. I think he only writes one other one. And he writes this psalm. And he has something to say to us. And so today we're going to look at the wake of results and the wake of our relations. So we're going to look at the wake of results first, our work. One of the tasks of following Jesus is to relearn the works that you did at first and to absolutely refuse to work like the devil. And so we're going to look at this. So work is a major component of our lives, right? I mean, we work 8, 10, 12 hours a day. It's part of what you do. It's where you spend an awful lot of time. And not only do you have the wake of what you actually do, but also the relationships that you have in that place of work. It can either be good or bad, an area where our work either magnifies our sin or it matures our faith. We can leave a good wake or a bad wake. Work is a good thing. And the temptation when it comes to work is for every human being to take that which is good and to twist it and turn it in such a way that it ends up being bad. I mean, we can turn it into sin, actually, something that is good given to us by the Lord. So let's look at verses 1 and 2 of chapter 127 of Psalms. It says, unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. It is vain to rise up early and to go to rest, late to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil, for he gives to his beloved sleep. Now, some people will read that and say, boy, isn't that a relief? I don't have to do anything. God's going to do everything for me. I don't have to work. I mean, he's going to take care of it. God's done everything. Jesus has done everything. I don't have to do anything. And Paul addresses this to the church at Thessalonica. There were some people in the church at Thessalonica who said, you know what, I'm not going to work. Because Jesus has done everything that needs to be done. As a matter of fact, Jesus is coming back, so I'm just going to sit back, relax, take it easy. I'm not going to work, and I'm going to live by faith upon those who are less spiritual than me who still work. Isn't that great? Okay, that's how they sort of did it, okay? And we see this today in our culture, right? There are 11 million job openings in our country right today. 11 million. They say the unemployment rate's 4%. Well, it wouldn't take anything to get those 11 million jobs. We could bring it down to 2% probably pretty quickly. And so there's one extreme of, just being lazy. I don't have to do anything. But then there's the other extreme in which we deify work, which we make work this deification of it. We think that we control and manage our lives by how hard we work, the effort that we put out. And Psalm 127 has another way to look at it, doesn't it? It says, unless the Lord builds, unless the Lord watches over, it's all in vain. The idea is that the Lord works, that the Lord builds, the Lord watches over. As followers of Jesus, we really do believe that God is at the center of everything, don't we? That we believe that Jesus is the center of our universe, the center of our being, the center of our accomplishments. But God worked, right? In the beginning, God created. In the beginning, he created. The Father continues to work. He redeems, and he helps, and he loves, and he comforts. And since God is working, we ought to be working too. And our work gets sideways, it gets messed up whenever we put it all on ourselves, as if like sort of, I don't, it won't. Or the other part of it where we just get lazy and we say, you know what, I'm just going to leave it to others and leave it to God. Without God, our work is useless. Basically, Solomon tells us, don't start anything without God. Is God the center of what you're doing? Proverbs 16:3 says, commit to the Lord whatever you do, and your plans will succeed. So whatever we attempt in life, let's put God first. Let's say, God, please come and show me the way. Bless my work. Give me direction. I mean, if you've ever run a business or if you've ever done some work, have you invited Jesus into it? Maybe you've gone about hiring people. And you struggled with hiring people, and you wonder, well, how can I hire people? And sometimes if you just try to hire people on your own, what happens is you get people who don't stay around. But whenever you give it to the Lord and show it, maybe it's doing the project and working through a project or working through something, and you're saying, Lord, I need your help in this. I can't do this on my own. Our work is to be done for the Lord, and whatever your hand finds to do, let's do it to the glory of God. And if you want your legacy, your results, your wake behind you, invite Jesus into it. You know, a lot of you work in places where you're not having much fun with it. You know, I mean, come on. They do call it work. And you're wondering, boys, is it worth it? You know what? You can still have a witness there. And you invite Jesus into it. Invite Jesus in. Now, I know some of you don't work. Some of you are, you're retired, which is great. Okay? But that doesn't mean you don't do anything. Right? You're still busy doing stuff. Do that for the Lord as well. Live it out. Leave a legacy of results that's impactful for Jesus. Look at verse 2. It says, "It is in vain that you rise up early and you go late to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil, for he gives to his beloved sleep." This is the third time that Solomon writes the word vain in vain. Vain basically means it's useless. You struggle and you work hard. It's useless for you to do that without the Lord. And the idea here is that you work long and hard, you get up early and all that. It's not talking about specifically don't get up early or don't stay up late, but it's the idea of doing it on your own with anxious toil. It's the idea of I don't, it won't. It's that fear factor. Eugene Peterson says this: "Don't work like the devil. Work like a believer. Work like a child of God. Trust God to meet your needs. God wants you to work and to work hard, but he also wants to give you rest. God grants sleep to those he loves." And these are these two extremes. There's a laziness, or there is this anxious working. And I tell you, I've lived in this anxious working for a long time. For years as a minister, I was working and we had young kids at home, and finally one of my elders came up to me and said, "Jeff, how many hours a week are you working?" And I said, "Well, somewhere around 80. And he told me, he said, "What you need to do is you need to go home and ask Tina how many hours she would like you to work." So I went home and I asked Tina, and I said, "Tina, how many hours would you like me to work?" And she said 50. So I went back and I reported to my elder, and I said, she said 50. He said, "Okay, 50 it is." And you know what? It was the best thing. It was the best thing for my relationship with her and with my kids. And it was actually, I became more productive. I became a better worker because I was able to rest and not be so anxious, not have that idea, if I don't, it won't. And it was a very, very freeing experience. Do I still work hard? Yes. So I want to encourage you, work hard, finish the day, and rest. Take a nap. Sometimes it's the most spiritual thing you can do. Now we move on from the idea of results to the idea of relationships. The idea of relationships, the wake of the relationships. The wake of relationship has to do with your home, but also all your relationships. Look at verses 3, 4, and 5. "Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb a reward. Like arrows in the hand of the warrior are children of one's youth. Blessed is the man who fills his quiver with them. He shall not be put to shame when he speaks with his enemies in the gates." What does it say about children here? Children are a gift from the Lord. Children are a blessing. You are just as dependent on God for raising your children and your relationship with them as anything else, right? The old German proverb says, "Many children make many prayers." And many prayers make many blessings. Too often, children today are considered a burden rather than a blessing. You know, whenever we were young and we had our 4 kids, and I interviewed at a church, and one of the interviewees asked me, he said, and they shouldn't have asked this question, it's probably an illegal question to ask, he says, "Are you going to have any more children?" And he says, "Do you know where they come from?" And I says, "Yes, and I enjoy it." And, children are a blessing, and the children are a gift from the Lord. And we need to look at them as that. And yet the wake of our children, the life that we give to our children and how they respond to us, do they not only love us, but do they like us? There's a Tim Allen show called Last Man Standing, and Tim Allen says this. He says, you know you're a good parent when your kids don't need you anymore. You're a great parent when they want you. You know, I think that's a pretty good way of looking at it. The wakes of our lives, of our relationships, it's an important part, right? The wake that goes behind us, how we treat people. And it just doesn't apply to our family, but also to all of our relationships. Do people still want to work with you? Would they work with you again? What wake do you leave behind? Are you an encourager? Are you a person that people are attracted to, not because just how you live, but how you treat them? Rarely do we give a thought of the kind of relationships that we want to have. Rarely do we think about that. And I want to tell you, your relationships with one another really, really matter. It's part of the wake that you leave behind. It's part of who you are. It's the part of your legacy. When you look back on your relations, have you pointed people to Jesus? Have you made their life better, or have you made them bitter? Or when you look back, do you see a wake of destruction? A few years ago, I was challenged to ask my family this question. What is it like to be on the other side of me? Could you ask that question? That's a tough question to ask, right? What is it like to be on the other side of me? And I went to and so I was a little nervous about it, and so I went to each of my kids. Now I have 4 kids. And they were teenagers at that time, basically. And I asked Tina first because I thought she would be the safest, you know. But I asked each of them, and you know what? Each one of them said the exact same thing: better than it used to be. Now, at first I thought, wow, that's a little, I wonder how I was before, you know. But what encouraged me was that it can get better. That you can have a better relationship with those people around you that you care about, that you love. And I hope that those that I love the most will love me and respect me the most. That's what I hope. I hope that happens. I hope that my children, when I am dead and gone, that they will say that I brought more joy than sorrow, that I brought more peace than anger, that I brought more generosity than selfishness, more truth than falsehood, more life than death, more hope than despair. And I hope that for you as well. How do you treat people? How do you treat your kids? How do you treat your coworkers? How do you treat your employees? How do you treat those friends that you have? How are you treating one another so that the wake that you leave behind is a wake of blessing, not a wake of curse? So that whenever you've left behind a wake that says, you know what, this man, this woman followed Jesus and left a good wake of results and a good wake of relationships. I hope that's what you want for your life, because that is your legacy. Psalm 127 is a beautiful psalm that teaches us to rest in God's blessing in our wake of results and relationships. All that we need comes from God. He protects us. We ask the Lord God to work through us and in us. That the city gives stability and security, that the food and daily provisions that we need to sustain life. The children who support and protect us. We can bring none of this by ourselves. We need God. So as followers of Jesus Christ, I want you to trust in Jesus and trust his ways to do 3 things. First of all, to build your legacy. To ask the Lord to build your legacy. What is the legacy? What is falling behind you? You're saying, well, you know what? I'm already 80 years old. What kind of legacy? Can I change it? Yes, you can. Remember Scrooge? He changed it. Okay? God changed it. It can change. Second is protect your legacy. That you know what? You got to protect it. Okay? Protect that legacy. And lastly, bless your legacy. Bless your legacy. Ask God to bless your legacy. And when we try to do things apart from God, we miss out on God's blessing. Unless the Lord builds the house, unless the Lord watches. The watchman watches in vain. The laborer builds in vain. But when we do it with the help of the Lord, in his guidance and his leadership, it works. Unless the Lord builds your family, the mother raising her children labors in vain. Unless the Lord builds the business, the entrepreneur works in vain. Unless the Lord builds the education, the student labors in vain. Unless the Lord builds a sermon, the pastor labors in vain. We need to put God in the front and the center of our lives. And the wake that you leave behind is dependent upon him. You know, Jesus went to the cross, and what were his words? One of the words that he stated at the cross was what? It is what? Finished. His work was done. And you think about Jesus and how his work left a legacy of people being saved. He came to seek and to save that which is lost. But he also left a legacy of relationships. Think about it. 11 of the 12 guys that followed him were willing to die for him. He left a legacy of relationships. A legacy of relationships that said, you know what, I'm willing to follow this guy wherever it meant. And so today, as we come before Jesus, let us ask him to build a legacy within our hearts, in our minds, in our work, in our relationships that impact the world for his name. For his name. All right?